Hey there. Happy Sunday to everyone. How are you? I hope you are somewhere finding the joy and the spirit of this day in your soul and taking this time to join us. I'm Sadia Davis, the director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. We recently launched our 9 days of giving, Empower, Educate, Create, Stream-a-Thon, and we're on night 6. We are thrilled to be able to shine a light on the visual arts industry, how the visual arts impacts our creative economy, and really talking to some of the most incredible thought leaders and visual art special individuals in the world. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Michelle T. Boone, Nick Cave, Erin, a curator who will help us understand how it all comes together, co-hosted tonight with Hill Harper. So why not get right to it? Let's just give you a couple more things to consider. We've got several more days to go, and we encourage you to log on to the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship and really discover that although we launched in February, we have curated over 27 workshops. We call them CCE Global Industry Talks. Then we have our webinars. We've done 5 of those, and we're going into our second boot camp coming up on December 12th. The Center for Creative Entrepreneurship was created out of the brains of 2112, the largest creative co-working space and creative incubator really in the world. And we're here to guide you and provide resources, relationships, and actually in some cases steer funding to creative entrepreneurs in their journey to success. So let's get started and talk the visual arts. Hill Harper is an award-winning, amazing humanitarian. He's an award-winning actor, best-selling author, entrepreneur, health and wellness ambassador, educator, and philanthropist. Harper, perhaps most recognized for his starring role in CBS hits television series drama CSI New York, where he played eccentric Dr. Sheldon Hawkins from 2004 to 2013, for which Harper won 3 NAACP Image Awards for Best Lead Actor in a Drama Series. Subsequently, Harper turned to CBS, starring in Covert Affairs, the fast-paced drama Limitless, and Showtime's award-winning drama Homeland. Harper will rejoin the cast of ABC's television drama. In fact, it's #1, The Good Doctor. He's on it now for its 5th season host, and how it really happened with Hill Harper on HLN and Star podcast Legal Wars. In theaters, Harper can be seen in Concussion, All Eyes on Me, and Warner Brothers picture film A Son Is Also a Star, starring Yara Shahidi. In addition to his performing career, Harper has authored 4 New York Times bestsellers: Letters to a Young Brother, Letters to a Young Sister, The Conversation, and The Wealth Cure, which chronicles his diagnosis for thyroid cancer and his journey to health. Letters to a Young Brother won several awards and was named Best Book for Young Adults by the American Library Association in 2007. Harper has been recognized with 7 NAACP Image Awards, 4 of them for his writing. His latest book, Letters to an Incarcerated Brother, which speaks to the current mass incarceration crisis, was released and critically acclaimed and was nominated for several awards. Harper graduated.
Hey.
No, I'm still going.
Oh my, listen, if the audience isn't asleep by now, that's the longest introduction.
No. Because see,
I would be asleep. I'm like, dang, I don't even want to see this guy now. Why would I?
Wait, but people don't understand. Like, you have a law degree from Harvard and there's another degree in there that's 2.
Degrees don't mean nothing. It's about what you do, baby. It's about what you do. It's not about the degree.
All right. Well, you know what? Thank you for being here, because you do.
It's great. You are so classy and beautiful and amazing and intelligent and just incredible sitting in front of that beautiful work of art. I don't know if that's a Monet, a Manet, or a Manet, but it looks good.
Well, you know, for Nick Cave tonight, I had to wear something that was sculptural and special and all the things. So I'm so happy, you know, that you joined us. And I specifically asked you, Hill, to join us in the visual arts because people need to understand that you have a deep desire and passion for the visual arts. You're a remarkable collector. Yeah. And arguably, for those who don't know, you are building a bit of a museum somewhere in the U.S.
Yes, I am. I am building a private museum. We haven't fully announced it yet, but you know, we will talk about it. And listen, you just mentioned Nick Cave. Nick Cave's certainly a hero, and I have one of his works in my collection that will be in the museum. Fortunate to have that work, and certainly would like to add more of his work. He's a genius. He is a world treasure, and it's great that he's on with us. And yeah, listen, when we talk about the visual arts, let's just set the stage. Let's just talk about what the deal is. And I'm excited about this conversation because quite often I think we don't dig deep enough into what's happening. You know, around the world right now, there's no question in my mind, in my opinion, that the greatest contemporary art that's being created is being created by African American and folks from African diaspora. And historically that's been the case, but even now it's just so much in your face. Part of the problem that we have is, first of all, art is created to be seen so that people can experience it and therefore have it impact their lives in whatever way. But what's happening with much of our art is that it gets bought up by these collectors that don't look like us. It ends up in boxes and warehouses. Oftentimes after it's purchased, it's not even taken out. And then 10 years later, 15 years later, it ends up at Sotheby's or Christie's on an auction block. And someone just monetized that creative work that could have and should have been made available to young eyes, impressionable eyes to get motivated. We are in an idea economy and an idea world now, and it's hard for us to expect our young people to ideate and create if they're not inspired. And many of these young people, they don't know who Nick Cave is. They don't know who Theaster Gates is. They don't know who Micheline Thomas is. They don't know who Derek Adams is. They don't know who Hank Willis Thomas is. They don't know who Carrie Mae Weems is. They don't, and it's not their fault. They don't know. See, that's the thing. It's not their fault. It's our fault for not creating space to introduce them to the work, to allow them to accept and see the work, experience the work, and know it. And so my museum is going to do just that. And hopefully it will inspire other collectors that certainly have bigger collections than mine, you know, and because I want their ego to get into it. Like, shoot, if Hill Harper can do it, I can do it. I'm going to do it. Please do it. Please. Yeah. Right. And I'm even hesitant to call it a museum because I think museum has a connotation that leaves us out of that dialogue. And so I want to redefine what that is. It's a space to see and experience our art for us, by us. And we'll have classes of school kids through every day once actually school's back in and people are meeting. So more, we can talk about that, but I really want to dig down into talking about this conversation. I'm excited about it. Talk about the fact that in that vortex, and when I say greatness of the greatest work being created, there are a number of those people, if not the top folks in that class, are all from Chicago or in and around Chicago. So if we talk about Nick Cave, we talk about the Gates, we talk about Kerry James Marshall, you know, we talk
Lewis.
Listen, we can go on and on.
Right.
Simone Lee. And so I want to dig into that idea. What's going on, or what's in the water, or what's in the vortex of Chicago that has created that ecosystem of these incredible artists to grow and come out. And at the same time, let's talk about definitions of art. Let's dig in with the curators and folks. Talk about how oftentimes our art has been historically called folk art. When you have people like Thornton Dial and Purvis Young and Lonnie Holly and wonderful artists creating art, and folks are trying to call it folk art when you get Rauschenberg and de Kooning making the same thing. So Rauschenberg could take a rusty tire and put some pole on it, and that's fine art, and that should be in the Met. But if Thornton Dial does that, that's just some found object folk art that some descendant of slave did. And so, and even talking about the quilters of Gee's Bend and how Mondrian, if you look at their work and you look at Mondrian, I gotta believe he stole. You're talking about theft. Puffy wouldn't call it theft because Puffy just, he samples. That's what he calls it. But but in art world, they're sampling. Picasso did it with African masks. So we understand all of this. Let's dig into these conversations. And I'm excited to have everybody talk about these things because this is a conversation that I don't hear folks having enough.
Well, let's have it right now. Let's bring on Erin Jenoa Gilbert. Erin is an New York-based curator and critic specializing in modern and contemporary art of the African diaspora. Most recently, the curator of African-American manuscripts at the Smithsonian Archives of American Art. Gilbert has also held positions at the Art Institute of Chicago and the Studio Museum in Harlem. She holds a BA in Political Science and African American Studies from the University of Michigan and an MA in Contemporary Art from the University of Manchester. Having lived in the US, Malawi, Africa, and the University and the UK, her international art advisory firm works with individuals and institutions to produce exhibitions, publications, collections that accentuate the relationship between art, power, and politics. In 2019 alone, she published text on Segna Ngandi, Alma Thomas, Deborah Roberts. In 2020, she will publish text Maria Lovelace O'Neill, Chakaka Booker, and Barbara Chase Ribbard. She is the co-creator of a Mary Lovelace O'Neill exhibition, which opens January 2021 at the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco, California, my hometown.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sadia. And you know what? I don't know why you stopped Hill. Hill was on a roll. I mean, anytime you're talking about Mondrian and Gee's Bend and Picasso and the African masks, I'm right there. We could just roll into the entire dialogue. I really appreciate being here with both of you. And thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about what I love.
That's awesome. So will you talk about, just give folks a sense of your relationship to art, why it's become your life's work, and what is that about, and because I think there's a lot of people out there that may be listening and say, you know what, I've never actually even thought about a career in art, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people who would ask, what is a curator? What does a curator do? And I think in many ways, when you began to talk about accessibility and you began to talk about the engagement between the work of art and its audience, be those adults, be those youth, be those educators, that's the role of the curator. We first engage with the artist. Our primary point of contact is with the artist and with the object. We interpret our objects. We think about objects in terms of a movement, an art movement, in terms of the conditions under which the object was made. We think about the materiality of the object. So again, if we think about Thornton Dial and Lonnie Holly and the entire group of Souls Grown Deep artists and everything they've contributed to modernism and to contemporary art. But as you say, them having been left out of the canon because of the materiality being considered the discarded, the detritus of human life. We now are really excited as African-American curators in the field to be able to break open that canon and to inquire of it, why it left certain artists out, and then to really be able to reinsert them into the narrative around modernism and contemporary art. And so I am one of, I would say, 20 or 30 curators who really dedicated their life to this moment and are really conditioned to enter into these spaces where there is contention and really challenge the canon to include artists of African descent alongside the Picassos, the Manets, the Monets, and all of those artists for whom the term art is so easily applied. And I'm thrilled in this particular moment to be able to engage with Chicago-based audiences, because Chicago is where my curatorial career, in many ways my museum career, began. Both Michelle and Nick have known me many years, and it was really walking through the halls of the Art Institute of Chicago and looking at Jacob Lawrence and looking at Romare Bearden and Elizabeth Catlett and so many of the artists, Charles White, who came through Chicago at some point or another and who left their mark and whom the Art Institute of Chicago was smart enough to collect. And so I began both by looking at the mid-century and 20th century artists, and then decided to really commit to understanding that lineage and trajectory, and thinking now about the relationship between, let's say, a Romare Bearden and a Derek Adams, right? And those collage practices, and thinking about the city and the block. And
so, from that standpoint, as from the curator's point of view, I'd love to hear you speak on this idea that, most of those artists that you just mentioned, and most of our high value art, is not necessarily owned by us.
Yeah.
And from the curatorial point of view, how do you think about that? And what do you do to do something about that? Or if someone's watching, what should they be thinking about doing to do if they're interested in leaning into that issue?
Well, I'm really thrilled that you are such an avid collector. And I think that's the first thing people need to consider, right? As curators, we are responsible to the audience. We're responsible to a board of directors. We're responsible to foundations. And part of what we do is fundraise. And part of what we want to do, what we have to do, is engage people who have capacity in acquiring works of art. Because part of what we rely on is not only that people will assist us in acquiring works of art. We have acquisitions committees, and it's an important phase within a collector's life to join a museum committee. If it is a acquisition committee, that could lead to being a member of the board. And as a member of the board, you have more influence over what the exhibitions are that are presented and what kind of collection the museum wants to continue acquiring. And that kind of influence at the board level is something that really only happens if you are deeply invested also as a collector, because the museum thinks it may at some point have a gift that is a part of your collection. So as a curator, I spend a lot of time with individuals, and it's December and we would be in Miami right now and be running up and down through fairs. Yeah, looking at
this weekend it would be Basel, so you would be down there. Now I want to drill down real quick because we're going to bring Michelle in a second, and Sadia can come back and do one of her long introductions of Michelle that she would want to do. I'm just giving you stuff, Sadia. We're having fun. Let's talk about an issue that I think a lot of people don't talk about. That's uncomfortable to talk about because we want to celebrate museums, because obviously we want to be supportive of them because they are a place that the public can come see art. And we want to encourage that.
Ideally,
at the same time, many of our major museum and institutions, they're sitting on billions and billions of dollars of a collection, while in many cases, not but 4, 5, 10, 20 blocks from there are people who are homeless, people who are starving, people who aren't doing that, yet they will not sell one work to take the money, but they will charge you $20 to come in. They'll charge you $150, $200 to join as a lifetime or a year membership, and they're sitting on billions. Like the Met is a great example. I mean, their collection is literally, one would say priceless but if they literally did some minor liquidation, they could raise billions, right? And yet we have people that we claim that these to be semi or pseudo public institutions, right? Yet they don't necessarily share the wealth, so to speak. What do you say to that? And how can museums be better, more custodial to the folks who are in the cities where they live, where the museum is located, and not be this place that's on a mountain or up these really fancy stairs that tourists come to, yet the people in the city that may live around it are in many ways left out of that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you've hit what is the topic really of the day. And I say of the day because even today, the question of the Baltimore Museum of Art's decision to deaccession 3 major works, one by Warhol, one by Marsden, and I unfortunately can't remember the other right now, for a total of $65 million to do exactly what you proposed, to engage the Baltimore community more deeply, to be able to even pay the security guards who are disproportionately people of color, frontline workers more, has been something that, and you know, in the context of the Sotheby's auction, was pulled at the last minute. And so it is a hot topic for us, for curators, because we are faced with that crossroads. And during COVID, where the idea of people coming into a museum is even less probable than it would have been 8 months ago, this question of these assets that have been collected over time, the purpose for which they were collected, and that real intention around everyone being able to access them, is indeed problematic. And it's something that I think a lot of us want to see shifted. We want to be a part of the larger dialogue, the larger think tank around how it is that museums both address the needs of the community and leverage their resources wisely. Because I do think that there are several issues as it pertains to what one might deaccession and then acquire with the money that it is able to use as a result. And museums in this moment globally are really trying to work through what it means to open up those doors using the collections that they have, as opposed to asking for other philanthropic dollars. Because the question of how philanthropy behaves when you have education and healthcare as additional needs is one that we are literally asking and answering today and as we speak.
Yeah. I mean, Erin, I think, you know, thank you for shining a light on what the process is, because what Hill brings up is, you know, it's something even coming into this talk tonight, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. People are doing the best that they can do to survive. And yet this conversation is still very impactful and important. But the reality is that, you know, all of it is relative. And one of the things about Chicago, and one of the reasons why the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship was created, was to sort of break down these silos and these walls that keep individuals and sectors separated from success, and create pathways into what historically have been very separated and segregated opportunities, which ultimately lead to some financial success. I've had several conversations with collectors who are, you know, Black, African-American, who have felt boxed out as collectors. That's a whole nother conversation. In fact, we're going to bring in some city folks from Chicago, that being Michelle T. Boone. Michelle T. Boone is the Chief Programming and Civic Engagement Officer at Navy Pier, an historic Chicago landmark and leading cultural destination. Michelle designs, curates, and presents arts and culture public programs, festivals, and special events. She also oversees PR, communications, responsible for marketing, promotions, and branding. Previously, Michelle served as commissioner of the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, producing and presenting more than 2,000 public programs, large-scale festivals, and special events annually. She also led the process for a new Chicago cultural plan in 2012 and launched the first Chicago Architectural Biennial in 2015. Prior to that, Michelle was a senior program officer at the Joyce Foundation. Yep, they do fund the Joyce Foundation, managing the arts and cultural portfolio. Michelle, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me. This has been great. I'm enjoying just listening. Do I have to talk? Can I just go back into the green room and continue to listen to this great conversation that's happening?
Yeah, I mean,
we need to hear from you. You are a hero, and you know what's interesting about you, I think, among many things, is you literally touch every vertical that we've already talked about, right? You're talking about folks who are coming into Navy Pier who, you know, may have no relationship to art, but you're allowing them to see it, experience it, and get it. And they're like, they just happen to be there for some other reason, but wow, this can happen. And all the way up to the great artists that are from Chicago and everything that's happening there. You know, so thank you for taking the time to add your wisdom to this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Now, out of what you've heard us talk about so far, which issue that we brought up is one that you'd be willing to sort of lend a little wisdom to?
Well, I'll just add on what you and Erin were just touching on in terms of museums and their collections. I think there's a moment right now where not just museums, but lots of major cultural institutions are really wrestling with this issue of art and social justice. And how do you position your institution as a true member of your community? And so places like the Met, or here in Chicago, the Art Institute of Chicago, I think, you know, now is the time where they're doing some really bold moves to really think about how is it then that we make ourselves relevant to the communities of our city today, that the dynamics have changed, the populations have changed. And so whether you're thinking of selling a work to find the resources to make yourself more connected or relevant to those diverse communities, offering kind of free admission programs. I think the Met, along with the other major public museums in New York, under the leadership, I believe, of the former Commissioner Tom Finkelpearl, worked out a deal where New York City residents have free access to those museums. And I know the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago got funding from one of their board of directors and some other individual philanthropists to make sure that the museum could be accessible for free to teenagers, to students of Chicago public schools. So I think, you know, they're really trying to figure it out without compromising perhaps the integrity of these grand halls by selling off the assets of things that really have positioned them as these world-class temples of art and culture.
Okay, you know, thank you for that. You know, something I've been thinking about that I would love your perspective on are all the careers that are possible, that are very viable within the art world, that aren't simply being the artist, you know. And there are many verticals, just like in the entertainment business. There are more people on a set than there are actors in front of a camera, right? You know, and there are many more jobs than that. And this was brought home to me really clearly just the other day. I was on the phone with actually George Namdi, and you and I were talking. And, you know, easily if I added up the amount of money I have to spend every year on framing, just the simple framing, yet I said, you know, why can't I find 2 or 3 young brothers or sisters that are interested in that as a career and spend the money I would be spending on framing to basically set up a business for them where they could learn how to frame, they could do framing for me, they could make money, and they could also frame for other folk and actually create a real business. Because the amount, you know, when we're talking about spending that type of money on framing alone, yet it's not creating jobs in our community, and it's not necessarily, you know, listen, a lot of framing isn't even that good, right? It's not even that great. So that's just one example of multiple careers. I'm sure people who are doing different types of work with you, how can we actually open up the job opportunity area within this art world for folks who look like us and in all these given cities?
Yeah, well, I think you hit it, you know, nail on the head. It's about exposure. How soon can you introduce young people to the idea that there are multiple careers in the arts? You know, when I was young, I was always attracted to the arts, but I recognized very quickly that I had no talent. But I knew that artists needed people behind the scenes to help them. And I wasn't quite sure what that was, but I knew there had to be jobs available to support that work. And so actually the first part of my career was spent in entertainment. I worked as a television engineer at the major networks here in Chicago doing camera and graphic design and audio work. And when I would say to people I was majoring in telecommunications, you know, the knee-jerk reaction was always, oh, you want to be a TV anchor? It's like, no, there's other stuff that you can do. And so I say the same thing for the arts, you know, like even my family, they still don't know what exactly do you do? What is a program officer? What is a commissioner? You know, my brother thought I had a bat phone when I was appointed the commissioner, like they had no idea like what that meant. So, you know, there are things in PR and communications. If you're a strong writer, you can write press releases, you can help market and promote the art, the work of artists. If you are going down the path to be an accountant, you know, my mother says I got to get a business degree. Okay, you can get a business degree, but these institutions have accounting departments, finance departments. There are jobs in this industry just as they are in banking, in television, and film, hospital work, administration. So, you know, just making the connection that you can do your passion, you can find a trade and a skill that will pay you a very well livable wage, but still be supportive and connected to the arts.
And Erin just brought the point about, you know, I didn't mention shipping and I didn't mention storage, but all of those are other verticals. Real quick, and I know, Sadia, we're going to keep moving, but I want to ask this one question because this is really about a forward-looking question, you know, and I'd love to get your perspective, Michelle. There's been a lot of talk recently about blockchain technology and art and ownership of art and being able to track the ownership and artists being able to basically, once they sell a work, they're able to maintain some measure of ownership in the exploitation of that work through multiple sales through some type of blockchain or tracking technology. Have you, as far as, you know, from the commission side or from your lexicon, how do you see that, and are you involving yourself in those types of discussions?
I think there's this kind of turning point that's happening that might be similar to what happened in the music industry years ago, where Black musicians and artists for years were getting ripped off by record companies and their managers and not owning the masters or the copyright to their work. And so I think there might be some lessons that could be learned from music in the way that those artists were able to retain the rights to their work, regardless of if it changed hands with a record company or music publishing. And so to think through, like, it's not just the immediate sale of this physical thing, but how do you retain the trademark, the copyright on the creation of the image that you created, because there's a way to monetize that for someone else. So how do you hold on to that, to the resale of a work later, to somebody going out printing T-shirts or posters of your work? And so I think there might be things that can be learned from years ago with the music industry and how those artists really figured out how to retain their rights and protect themselves financially for years.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to be explored by intellectual property attorneys, right? And you know, they sit at our 160,000 square feet, you know, in terms of the amount of resources that we have to offer. But thank you, Michelle, so much for describing that, because one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking about, and Hill mentioned the verticals within the industry of the visual arts, is how being in this position, I've become acutely aware of how so many of our creative industries do have a pathway to politics, maybe, or city government. How can we better become advocates for our community by becoming aware of those positions that exist, right? As well as the executive positions, whether it's for the Studio Museum of Harlem, who's looking for a finance person, right? Or a COO. These are things to think about in terms of looking at how to guide younger individuals into some of these job opportunities, and maybe not even younger individuals. There are individuals right now who are shifting pathways. One in mind I'm thinking of, who's a finance background, could shift into the art world instead of into the finance track, right? And so that's one of the things that we are really keen on sort of helping to navigate and develop for the creative entrepreneur and for the creative business person. And speaking of which, I want to shine a little light on the work that you guys were doing over there at Navy Pier pre-COVID.
Hi, I'm Nick Cave, visual artist living here in Chicago, working down at Navy Pier on a series of sound suit performances. A sound suit is this sort of sculptural object that can be worn that's made out of an array of materials that really sort of generates sound. But it's really about the physical body wearing this sort of object that becomes an instrument of sorts. The performance Heard is really built around this sort of dreaming, magical sort of expression. We all are sort of working with these very tight schedules, doing a lot, and we forget to dream. And dreaming is really part of an aspiration to be and sort of constantly be expanding what you think about yourself and how you want to proceed forward. What I tend to do is bring a performance to a city and then hire the community to build it. Being from Chicago, this is really my first performance in the city. So I was telling the dancers and the musicians that this is really just as much about them as it is about me. It's an opportunity for them to support and express their love for the city of Chicago and to honor that through the work that they do. It's really nice to connect and build these relationships, to collaborate, and to see it all come together based on the community at large. It's very important that I get my work into these sort of larger venues that really reaches a broad range of people, such as Navy Pier. I think it really is looking to diversify in terms of what type of cultural activity they bring here. I think that they're making smart moves. They're creating these amazing venues and stages for a variety of things to happen. It's really a destination where people come, they gather, they're here for the entertainment, for the excitement. It really sort of sets a great stage for this kind of expression.
Nick Cave lives and works in Chicago. He is an artist and foremost a messenger working between the visual and performing arts through a wide range of mediums, including sculpture, installation, video, sound, and performance. Cave is well known for his sound suits, sculptural forms based on the scale of his body, initially created in direct response to the police beating of Rodney King in 1991. Sound suits camouflage the body, masking and creating a second skin that conceals race, gender, and class, forcing the viewer to look without judgment. They serve as a visual embodiment of social justice that represent both brutality and empowerment. Throughout his practice, Cave has created spaces of memorial, through combining found historical objects with contemporary dialogues on gun violence and death, underscoring the anxiety of severe trauma brought on by catastrophic loss. The figure remains central as Cave casts his own body in bronze, an extension of the performative work so critical to his overture. Cave reminds us, however, that while there may be despair, there remains space for hope and renewal. From dismembered body parts stem delicate metal flowers, affirming the potential of new growth. Cave encourages a profound and compassionate analysis of violence and its effects as the path towards an ultimate metamorphosis. While Cave's works are rooted in our current societal moment, when progress on issue of global warming, racism, and gun violence, both at the hands of citizens of law enforcement, seem maddeningly stalled, he asks how we may reposition ourselves to recognize the issues, come together on a global scale, instigate change, and ultimately heal. Mr. Cave.
Hey, I want to say something straight out the gate. In fact, I have two things after seeing that video. First, this has nothing to do with seeing the video. First, Nick, we've never really met, I don't believe, but you are a national treasure, and I just want to say that out of the gate. You are a world treasure, and know that there are many of us out here that don't know you, but love you, support you, and are thankful for you. Okay, that's number one. Number two, my other comment is, it's amazing that you found the one day a year that Chicago had nice weather for for your installation performance. That August 7th, whatever year that was awesome. Because I'll tell you, I never
Believe me, you don't know how we agonized over wondering what the weather was going to be.
No, that's
Thank
good
you.
stuff.
Thank you so much.
Listen, can we jump in real quick and talk about, when I think about New York City and from like 1977 to 1983, the fact that you had hip hop, the creation of hip hop, you had the creation of punk rock, you had Basquiat, Warhol, Herring, you had all this art happening. To me, it's one of the most creative and amazing places, like a vortex. And in many ways, Chicago, in this last set of years, has been that as well in its own way. What do you think that's about? And so many amazing artists, so much creativity, so much, and then also in the political area, right? You had political leadership coming out of Chicago. There's a lot of a confluence of things happening. How do you explain that? Like, how does that? What do you make of that?
I think that I think it's really, for me, it's really about having this sort of space to imagine, space to dream, being able to have the sort of amazing facilities, like Fiesta, myself, Carrie, where we can sort of, imagine having this sort of property where you can sort of build in the way in which you could only hope for in order for you to sort of move your ideas forward. I have this building here called Facility. It's a project space. It houses the studio of myself, my partner Bob Faust, my brother Jack Cave. We all are artists, but we also look at it as this sort of incubator for, in terms of service. How do we look at a facility as this sort of property that serves the community in a cultural way? So, for me, it's a lab. Chicago's always been this sort of amazing laboratory to experiment. I find that I sort of work, I sort of am very sort of to myself, getting the work together, and then I sort of hit the center of the target. And then I sort of remove myself and allow the work to do what it's meant to do. And so it really sort of allows this sort of amazing sort of space for me to sort of focus. Because if I was in New York, let me tell you, I don't know if it would be art, fashion, or what, because I'm interested in all of it. But here I can kind of sort of hone in and really kind of get to the bare essence of what it is that I do and why I do it.
Okay.
Well, I gotta say, I mean, the background alone is just giving me everything I need for like the rest of the year. Thank you very much, Mr. Nick Cave. You know, I really want to shine a light that, you know, if it's possible to discuss that pre-pandemic, Michelle and you may have been discussing something that you were going to put together. I'll leave it to you to discuss what you can and cannot, because if it's something that's still going to happen, you know, we know how these things go.
Well, you know, with Michelle Boone, you know, we've been working on a number of projects, and, you know, I am so grateful that she has this amazing amount of trust in me. And she knows that I'm going to bring my A game, period. And that my work, when it comes to working with her, it's really pretty much based within this sort of public sort of spectrum. So I sort of think about projects that are about community. Really sort of, for me, it's like I'm in a position where I can pull in all of these amazing young people. I could bring them into this residency for 3 weeks to build a project, and for them to be in a space and to see what's possible is everything. That is everything. For them to know that, whoa, we're building this project in the moment, and to see the end results and to see this audience there to engage and to be supportive allows them to only imagine what their futures could look like. So for me, that's really what it is in these sort of collaborations and these sort of outreaches. You know, we're working on a project when things get back up and running, titled The Let Go. And it's a project that took place at the Park Armory in New York City. And it really was a project that came out of this place of frustration. And where do we go to let go? Where do we go to sort of like to work through our anger, through the issues that are politically sort of holding us down? And so the let go is this sort of space that allows you to come in and just dance. And dance allows us to be safe. It's harmless. And so there is this 40-foot high by 100-foot long Mylar streamer curtain that will move throughout the entire space while movement is occupied with a curated selection of house DJs that will be playing.
What caused the movement? In other words,
the curtain is suspended on a track.
Why you want another one?
On a moving track.
On a moving track, is that matched to the music, or that's just, or is it? Oh no, no,
not to the music. Yeah,
that's amazing.
I'll just say, from our perspective, you know, Nick is certainly a world-class artist that has presented his works all over. Detroit, New York, Louisiana, internationally, Australia, Germany. And it just struck me that we have this treasure, as you call him, Hill, right here in Chicago, yet he had never had an opportunity to share his performative works right here at home. And so I quickly jumped on it and said, look, Navy Pier is going to be your performance home in Chicago.
And so to me, that highlights just an amazing point that presence matters. You know, if you're not in that room, you know, like in Hamilton, they talk about, I want to be in the room.
Right.
If you're not in that room to make that point, then that exhibit doesn't happen that way. And so we have to know that we have to be everywhere and fight for places to have seats at the table in the room to bring those things up. Now, I do want to talk real quick about the business of art from the perspective of an artist. I brought this up early on in the conversation, but I'd love to hear your perspective, Nick, about the simple fact that with artists such as yourself, where the work is very competitive to access, and it's primarily white-owned and white-run galleries that most of our artists and top artists work with and through. And many of them have their own lists of people that they give access to the art to. How do we start to break through to allow people of color access to the top level, most valued pieces that an artist creates? And you know, what do we do, and how can obviously there are barriers to entry
Not early.
Not early.
Not early in the career.
I'm not just talking about money. I'm not just talking about affordability, because that's what galleries try to sell you, and it's not true. There are plenty of Black collectors out there that can afford the work at full market price, and no one's a lot of they're not necessarily asking for discounts and this and that and the other. What it is though is access to the work first, access to the choice work, and certainly barriers to entry have come down from the standpoint that you can reach out to artists via Instagram and DM, and then they can call the gallery and say, listen, you better move this person up the list and this, that, and the other. Yes, but I would love to hear your perspective as an artist in that, in that echelon. How do you control who gets your work, and how do you make the galleries sort of bow down to that?
For me, I think it's so many things. I think that, there's the independent curators. There are the interior designers. These are people that really sort of are working with people that have the means to collect. And what does that mean? What do you want on your walls? How do you sort of educate someone that is not familiar with collecting at all? Well, how you do that is by bringing them to Miami Basel, Art Expo, Chicago Expo, bringing them to the museums, getting these individuals on various boards, getting them involved in museum relationships. May it be that they are working amongst the young sort of collectors, or whether or not they are sort of interested in being a sponsor. So I think that I think for me, it's I sort of work between art and fashion. And so those people that I know that are interested in fashion, it's not that they're interested in fashion, it's really like they're interested in a lifestyle. And so how do you surround yourself by the lifestyle that you choose to create for yourself? And so it really is about sort of bringing them into the fold, sort of exposing them to a certain way of way in which things exist. It's really sort of, with the gallery, I sort of not, I'm not only working, within the gallery, but, I'm an artist that also sort of, I think about myself as a civic leader, cultural leader. So I'm working across all boundaries, and it's not within the institutions only. It's with the civic sort of community leaders that sort of operate and run the cities. It's really working. It's really sort of taking on, you know, what am I accountable for at the end of the day? Other than just making my work.
You know, it's interesting, and you know, Michelle was just on what she was on before, and she was talking about buy early, which I completely agree with what she said. But it's also in part of that the information, like you were just saying, having access. I remember I was at an event in New York. Thelma Golden was sitting next to me, and I can't remember what event it was. We were just sitting there, we were having a nice dinner, and you know, it was one of those events with a lot of people, and we were talking about. I think it was back when Kerry James Marshall had an exhibit at the Met Briar, and we were talking about it, and she'd asked me if I'd collected his work, and I'd said no, not really. I hadn't, and I felt like I had missed the boat in terms of affordability of the work, and certainly moved and motivated me. And she's like, well, you know, I think they still probably have some different, signed prints, these black and white prints that he did that are in, deep down in the Met Brewer, like that they did for his exhibit that didn't necessarily sell out because people don't even know that the bookshop has those things, and I wouldn't even be, from my head, I wouldn't even be thinking about going there to buy that work, even thinking to make that connection. But Thelma did. She said, just go over there and see what they got. They probably have some. And they did. They had a whole series of about 4 or 5 signed works that were, I can't remember, they were black and white and they were beautiful, just individuals. They were gorgeous and they still had them. And but for that conversation with Thelma, we never would have known. So the idea of having conversations is important, right? Learning where the work is, who has the work, and how do you gain access to it is key. Just so you know, the piece that I collected of yours, Nick, is one of those big circular mandalas that you did, which are it's just gorgeous and beautiful. Fantastic. One of my favorite pictures of my son is him and standing in front of it, and it's just a gorgeous work. So thank you for that. So I think everybody's coming back in. Saudi, I know that you have also an ask of the community of folks that are watching.
Well, yeah, but that's I wanted to just kind of take this moment and share some of Erin's works that actually kind of shine a light on some of these works that we were talking about in this conversation, some of which are Nick Cave's. And feel free to comment.
Well, and that's Kerry James Marshall. The intention was really just to be able to think through, as you've all mentioned, who are these amazing Chicago artists and what have they meant to the contemporary art and modern art globally? And Ed Clark, who we didn't mention, who's obviously passed on now, but that's really all that this is. At the beginning is just really Chicago heavy, William Pobell, who's there now, and some others. But as we get further along, that's the Astor Gates, you'll see more of the contemporary artists, Candida Alvarez, who are outside of Chicago, but who've come through Chicago at some point or another. So that's all it was, not my work, but their work.
Well, the works that you shared with us to show tonight, in a sense, is a form of curation. And I definitely wanted to be able to bring these up. And if anybody had anything that they wanted to share or speak on, I think that it's important that we do, bring forth some of these visual images of the visual art itself.
There is one thing that, as everyone's been talking about, the actual landscape, the ways in which we have this intersection of public institutions, private institutions, and the ways that the gallery sector engages. I think it's really important, especially at this moment, to acknowledge how many African-American artists are really creating those institutions. So the work that the Astor has done with Stony Island Arts Bank, and that Noah Davis's family has done in LA with the Underground Museum, that Rick Lowe has done with Project Row Houses. There's so many of those institutions that I think it's so important for us to remain engaged with and continue supporting. And I also want to thank you, Nick, for 846 in New York at Jack Shaman Gallery. That's such a poignant statement on the moment that we're in. And for me, as I always think about that relationship between art, power, and politics, that platform that artists have that many of us don't, that you leveraged in this moment. And I'm so grateful to you for it.
Thank you.
That last image that came up was artist Nate Lewis, and I collected. That was a series of works he did around the monuments that were coming down, the Confederate monuments, and I collected one of those from that series. It may have been, I'm not sure if it was that one or another or similar, but the connective tissue between this moment that we're in now in the activism, social unrest, demand for change from the top of the funnel all the way down to the sneakers on the ground. Our artists and our top artists are playing such a vital role in that. Nicholas Thomas, obviously. So much of that is so brilliant, yet again, it goes back to that point. So many of our young people don't know who these folks are. And I believe that we need to make sure they make the connection that this person who's creating this amazing art looks like your grandmama, your uncle, your cousin, your auntie. And that means you can do it too. You can create anything. And that's a beautiful thing about where we are, you know.
And I just wanted to make the point when I said earlier about buy early, I meant buy early as a collector, that start working that muscle early. Like you don't have to like jump into the game buying Nick Cave or Richard Hunt or Kerry James Marshall, but begin early. You know, you can start to buy works, buy prints, just educate yourself, get into the habit of supporting artists and buying art. And I think for many of us, we just don't come from that. You know, we didn't grow up in households that valued the purchase of artworks. We may have had like Annie Lee hanging on the wall or something like that. But I think as you become an adult and you're starting to, you know, be more aware, you can begin to be a collector at lots of different points of entry. And so you shouldn't be overwhelmed by the bold-faced names in the contemporary art world. There are lots of ways to begin right in your own community and be supportive of local artists.
Michelle, I totally agree with you. And thank you for saying that. I think that's an important point. I remember when I was in school and I was, you know, just pounding the pavement in New York, there was a street artist named Jabolo who was down around Washington Square creating art with an ink pen. And you still can go online now and get some Jabolos because he was so ubiquitous in that area. Like if you were in the Washington Square area, you would see Jabolo every day, and he would sell your work for like $5, 20, $10, whatever. And there are people I know that have Jabolos, and it's like this wonderful little moment in time of this work. And it's not about the appreciation, because the work, I think it sells online now for $200, which is a pretty big appreciation from $5. But you get into the habit, and that's just an entryway into becoming a collector of more work. So I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I mean, this has really been tremendous. And Michelle answered the question that I was going to ask each of you for one tip. And that was a brilliant one. Thank you, Michelle. And as we go around, Nick Cave, do you have a tip for, you know, it could be a young person or an individual at any age, really, that, you know, is considering a pathway in the visual arts, not necessarily as the artist, but maybe in the business of the visual arts? One tip.
You know, I think one tip is just go for it. I think that, you know, we've got to, I think the young people today are exposed to so much, so rapid through the phone. And there's a lot that they can sort of learn and generate in terms of making these sort of cultural sort of connections through that device. And so I think technology for them is sort of their right hand. And so how do you sort of use this tool to structure and set up yourself in a way that you can sort of be introduced and start to sort of direct and find a pathway in.
Nice. Erin, your tip?
You know, I'm torn. I first want to say read. I mean, I think that if you're engaged in or interested in anything, you want to become as educated as you can about it. And there are people that you can reach out to find out what to read. I think it's so important to steep yourself in the knowledge of what contemporary artistic practice is, or modern art is, or African American art is, and really, before you buy, to have a sense of what it all looks like. And if you can't and don't want to read, then seek advice. You know, there are advisors, curators, people like Michelle and myself who are really happy to work with people as they are considering how to become more involved, because we do value and appreciate that engagement. But I'd say read.
It's beautiful. Yeah. There are some appraisers that are out there that are good individuals to lean on. I can think of a few who have good insight. In fact, speaking of which, before I forget, something that you guys should know that's kind of unique because of COVID, these, whether it's Art Basel right now, in fact, Nick Cave, you are in a showroom at Art Basel?
Yeah.
Miami? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely want to put that up there for people who can go and visit, where you can online go and see Nick's work right now at Art Basal Miami. One of the innovations that's kind of happened is that the art world has had to publish prices, which they never do, right? It's my understanding they don't. But they've had to publish, and they'll give a short window of time that individuals can go on and kind of get a sense of the value of some of the pieces before they consider making a purchase. So there's some things that are happening due to COVID that we need to be aware of, that in a sense is sort of opening that vault of information that's been shielded for so long. And I think that's also something to consider. Hill, a tip that you have for us?
You know, I think on the individual collector level, the biggest tip I have is to go to art fairs and small ones. There are so many art fairs, particularly focus on the ones where the artists are actually going and manning their own booths. You know, because it gives you an opportunity to, one, meet so many wonderful artists that aren't necessarily even represented by a gallery at that point in their career yet. And it also lets you start to learn about what type of art you're attracted to, where do you like leaning into. And as soon as you start to learn about yourself and your own tastes, and then you start meeting artists who are actually creating work that really resonates with you, there starts to be this kind of symbiotic relationship that happens, and it makes you feel good about it. You know, I love actually spending money on art, purchasing art. So I focus, I focus on African American, African diaspora, contemporary artists who are living. That is my box, right? Because I believe in supporting living artists. I'm not in the business of trading art of folks who have passed on. Just whatever. So we can talk. That's a whole other conversation. But so I love spending money on artists like Nick Cave, that I think is a hero, who is alive to actually receive the money I spend, which is great. So that's what I love. And also, Michelle made a great point. Instagram is one of the great. I've connected with so many artists on Instagram. I shoot them a DM, and I talk about their work. Even if it's an artist I haven't even collected yet, I will promote their work. If they say, "Hey, Hill, you have a big platform where you promote this, throw it up on your Instagram or your Twitter," I'm happy to do that, because to me, we're all in this together. Dr. King said we're all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny. I truly believe that. We are all in this together. We can support each other and help each other elevate. So speaking of helping each other elevate, I know we got to support the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. Anybody who's watching, who's out there, please, Saudia, please explain this window of giving and how folks can actually support, what you all are doing.
Yeah, so it's really, thank you, Hill. It's really important in this season of giving along this 9-day Stream-a-Thon. You know, the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship provides the resources, the skills, the knowledge, and relationships, really, to chart a pathway forward for business success in the creative industry. We believe in empowering individual creative entrepreneurs for sustainable success and stimulating the economy. And so it's really important that, as we've given free programming for the last 8 months, that we too, like other nonprofits and organizations have to fundraise. I will say that we are in the process of building an e-learning platform, which you can learn and discover any one of those 9 sectors of the creative industry. You can take an assessment, and that assessment is tied to a value that will give you a job on that 3rd line of the platform, thereby creating a pipeline into the workforce of the creative sector. So once we get that fully executed and built, we'll be able to self-sustain ourselves on that. But until we do that, we do ask that somewhere in your heart, you realize the value that we are shining a light on other organizations. We primarily focus on 80% of other creative sectors, our partners, 20% of ours to give programming. So we encourage you to give by going to givecce.com. There's no amount that's too small and no amount that's too big. And we'll show our drummer. Legendary multi-percussionist Kahil Elzabar has been the forefront of the spiritual jazz avant-garde scene since the 70s. He's performed with legends Nina Simone, Dizzy Gillespie, Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Cannibal Otterberry. Kahil Elzabar's latest 2 essential albums on Spirit Muse have rightfully reestablished him worldwide as an authentic leading artist in spiritual jazz and groove. It is a spiritual thing. Okay.
So we're over here trying to figure out our lighting, right? And we've got Lucy Slavinsky, light sculpture, visual artist.
That's right.
Over here checking to make sure our light is good.
That's
right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Why isn't she a part of the talk tonight? I slipped on me. Forgive me.
Yeah.
But right now I'm talking to you.
We'll do it again, right?
That's right. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Kahil Elzabar, welcome.
Thank you, Saudia. Great to be here. Great cause. You got to put it in, make it happen, and the time is now.
Time is now. So speaking of the now, you are creating a new worker space or creative space. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Well, the space is called the Collaborant. So it's the labyrinth of collaboration.
Love it.
And the idea is to create a multidisciplinary art space for the practitioner of work, for the showcasing of work, for the collaborative, intersection of the arts, and to create a local community space in the wonderful Little Village neighborhood where we are. We're at 2500 South Sawyer.
Beautiful.
1 block west of Kedzie. And my partner and I, Lucy Slavinsky, have acquired a 13,000 square foot building.
Wow.
Well, there will be a art production studio, a recording studio, a social kind of event, small space, an art gallery, all in the same cultural campus.
Beautiful. That sounds fantastic. I mean, the more that we can spotlight and shine a light on makers, spaces to provide creative entrepreneurs a way to continue to create. I mean, that's what we're here to do with the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. So thank you not only for shining a light and providing a space for creatives to create, but also for joining us at this very special occasion for our Empower, Educate, create Stream-a-Thon.
It is a pleasure to be in our community of Chicago, but through you guys, a global reach, so that we can talk about the importance of the arts in our communities and how that can be a much more effective opportunity for all that participate.
Absolutely. So let's watch you do your magic. Sir Kahil Alzabar.
Thank you. Oh, pleasure.
Unbelievable. Thank you tonight for Nick Cave taking time out of his busy schedule to join us, Michelle T. Boone, Erin, and thank you to Sir Kahil Alzabar for sharing your gifts, your talents with our creative entrepreneurs. Thank you to Hill Harper for taking, time out of your schedule to be with us and to co-host this evening with us. It really means a lot. And hopefully this dynamic conversation will spotlight the value of the visual arts, the opportunities of job placement within the visual arts, and finding your place and knowing that there is a role for you. I'm Sadia Davis, the director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, and I encourage you to tune in with us tomorrow as we dive into sports. But it's sports after sports, right? So the business of after sports. Let's talk to individuals who have found companies that they've created after being professional athletes. Enjoy this weekend. It's Sunday. Hug someone. Give love to your family. We're in the midst of a very critical time in our life, in our world. Be sensitive and kind to one another. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your weekend.